you're having trouble,
Real recovery.
people point out constantly addresses are important and their identity. Like, don't see
It's not a recovery. It's real stories, real recovery. I am Kat, and I'm on the road of recovery.
Well, my name is Zach, and I am from Columbus, Ohio, and I have been in long-term recovery now for 11 years. And today I am a brother and a son and an advocate and a policy analyst and sober.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Could you start off by sharing a bit about growing up?
Yeah, I grew up, I always say I grew up in a loving home. I grew up in a rural community, the heart of Appalachia. 300-acre cattle farm, parents very, blue collar. Mom was a teacher, dad was a mechanic. What I realize now looking back, however, was that there was really a lot of dysfunction in the home. Both of my parents struggled with addiction. Mom struggled with mental health. Both of them, now deceased, did their best. I think what we would call a functioning alcoholic, a functioning addict, but did their best to keep us in a stable, loving home. Lost my father when I was at 13, and so really watched my mother struggle with her addiction and kind of saw what addiction and spiraling looks like in real time. And so then myself, as I kind of came of age and was a teenager, started kind of toying with some of these things myself and looking at, how do I explore the world around me? At the time, I was realizing that I had same-sex attraction as well. And so really what started is trying to explore what that meant for, a teenager on a cattle farm, you can imagine, really became a coping mechanism and followed me on into college. One of the challenges with kind of coming to terms with what I see now was the beginning phases of my acting out in addiction was that, number one, it was same-sex attraction, which was already taboo. I was very involved in a faith community, which was not a fan of all things LGBT. So I was not only trying to manage the beginning phases of my addiction, I was also trying to keep it secret and suppress it, which of course is common with a lot of folks' recovery journey. But realizing that I was developing a process-based addiction with sex and sexuality really made it very, very difficult to seek help until I really started finding some of those hitting rock bottom moments later in my 20s.
Gotcha. So, and this is going to be whatever you're most comfortable with. Could you kind of paint a picture of what active addiction was like for you?
Yeah. The beautiful thing about the recovery program that I'm in is that it really allows the individual in recovery to work with a sponsor and accountability partner to say, this is what I need to abstain from because it is X, Y, and Z. And so in my active addiction, it would mean hours spent alone. It would be preoccupation when I was with people that I loved. It would be stepping out on individuals that I was dating, perhaps, all in the interest of continuing to feed this obsession and this compulsion. And then eventually, when I came to Columbus in 2009 and began working a profession that I'd wanted to be in my entire life, I realized that some of the very triggers that I was having were the same people that I was tasked with supervising and teaching as my professional career.
Right. This question you don't want to answer, that's fine. When you were in prison, were there services that were helpful to you?
Yes, there absolutely were.
Could you talk about
Oh,
some
of
of
course,
those?
yeah. First of all, I was blessed with an incredible counselor
Okay.
who constantly sought to bring individual resources to me based on what I needed and what I identified that I needed, not a pre-prescribed assessment, a pre-prescribed program. It was, here's what Zach needs. And that felt a lot like the rooms because I was able to tailor my recovery to what I knew I needed to recover from, not just what I was told, here's the same old thought replacement therapy that we're going to use on everyone. So that was the first thing that was really essential for me. The other thing that was kind of a surprise that I learned that I still practice to this day from prison is yoga and being able to pour back into my body when so much of my acting out and so much of my addiction involved, using physicality in a way that wasn't really matching my ethics. And so now every week I go to yoga because I started doing it in a setting where it was a coping skill, and it was a grounding tool, but it didn't just have to be while I was in finishing school, if you will. It still works to this day just as well, and it's an important part of my outer circle. In addition to those two kind of glimmers of hope, I still had really great access to music, to faith communities. And there were a lot of folks in the community at the prison where I was incarcerated who were dealing with the same kind of plight that I was. And it took a good year and a half to kind of start to suss out some of those individuals. But as you kind of got to know individuals and share with each other, you realize that while our Department of Corrections may not recognize this type of process addiction as something that they'll offer as a 12-step group, there were those of us that could still informally bond together and support each other in spite of it not being through a formal meeting. I think service for me was a huge part. As I mentioned at the beginning, my mother was a teacher. And so she taught in the school district that I attended. And so I was in the classroom from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. So I wanted to teach my entire life. And while one of the consequences of my addiction was losing that formal opportunity, I still teach every day through service. I still teach every day through opportunities like this, sharing my story, sharing my journey, and then helping the next person. For me, that's a really important part that keeps me sober. And the group that really kind of wrapped their arms around me were all individuals who had also dealt with the criminal legal system because they too had a conviction. It didn't matter what my conviction was. It mattered that I was on a journey, that they had walked the journey, they wanted me to be successful. Right. And that was a game changer because in carceral settings, there tends to be kind of a rank order of which types of offenses people are okay with and which types they aren't. And so, it's very easy for someone with this type of process addiction to be turned into almost like a super felon. And you see that locally. Unfortunately, there are all kinds of carve-outs, even in reentry services, that get big funding for certain types of convictions. My opinion is that makes our society less safe than more safe if we're restricting access.
Right.
But for me, what has always worked is sharing my story, being honest, giving back. Those things keep me sober.
Where do you see are the kind of top 2 or 3 biggest challenges that people face, and what's being done about them?
Yeah. Right. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind right now is I think our corrections system is figuring out how they want to handle MAT. And it's a very complex, web of for-profit and coverage and availability and security and, all of these pieces. So I think there's a huge opportunity and a huge challenge right now to say, how are we handling MAT? And how are we handling MAT and some of the exclusions that it might cause in someone's reentry? And so in some ways, if our system is not careful, we're going to cause recovery to not be as compatible with reentry simply because someone is on, methadone and can't get into any of the sober living homes in their catchment zone where they want to go home to.
Right.
Because they were put on methadone by the place that they were supposed to be cared for and kept in the custody of. So I think that's a huge challenge. I think we still have a lot of stigma. A lot of stigma. Yes. And yet the data tells us that 1 in 3 people have some sort of criminal legal impact. The data tells us that by 2030, 1 in 2 working adults will have a criminal conviction. 1 in 2.
Oh my gosh, really?
Working adults. Yeah. So this is no longer a those people over there thing.
Right.
And much like recovery, this is not a those people over there thing that, wearing trench coats, hiding in the basements of churches, having their secret meetings. This is very visible. And I think the longer we continue to pretend that it's not just part of our society, I think the more opportunities we're going to miss to treat it in a way that's really humane and healing.
What do you say to those people of, if somebody's, going in and they're a shorter time person, because you were able to get some services, you got a counselor and whatnot. So what would you say to them about what they should do when they get there?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is that while their opportunities for programming and all of that are certainly limited, if one has the self-determination to pour into themselves, that's where things like go to a 12-step meeting or go to a religious service, even if that's not your jam, find, the nugget that you could take with you for that week and apply it in a way that makes sense for you. So, being able to pivot, but also being able to adapt other messages into the language that works for you.
Yeah.
So while I don't identify as an alcoholic, I would still go to the AA meetings because I wanted to hear the language. I wanted to hear the experience, strength, and hope.
Right.
That was important for me.
Yeah.
I just substituted in my process addiction for what I was hearing.
Right.
That worked. But what also worked was going to the library and pouring into myself. Right. What also worked was going to counseling more often than what I was required to, because it was a touch point. It was accountability. It was living in consultation. So for me, what I always remain grateful about is that I entered the rooms and started my recovery journey before incarceration. because it allowed me to really get a sense of what worked for me from those kind of principles and tenets, so I could pursue those when I was incarcerated.
Right.
And what I'll say is that the program that I was eligible for, wait lists and all of that stuff, it was good, but no substitute for my own self-determination to pour into myself in less traditional ways.
So you really got to want it.
Yeah.
You got to want to do something
Absolutely.
different. So.
And that being said, there are certainly folks who will be sitting in a victims awareness course or a thinking for a change course and will have an epiphany and point to that moment as something that was impactful for them. And so I don't want to take away from that.
Right.
But for me in my journey, I really had to make the choice every day to pour into myself in less traditional ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that you mentioned was accountability partner. I've never heard that term before. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use accountability partner as someone who I can text or call when I might be triggered, when I am kind of moving in my, what I consider my middle circle, where it's like warning signs. It's also someone who I can say, hey, I want to make a commitment to finishing up this chapter of this book so I can check in with my sponsor on it next week. Friday, would you hold me accountable and just check in?
Yeah.
And just knowing that that text is going to come motivates me to do what I said I was going to do.
Right.
And so the accountability could be the big things. You know, I am about to relapse, all the way to I need to get my ass in gear and finish this stuff. So hold me accountable to that. And then there's that reciprocity too. The beautiful thing about accountability partners in my life are some of these accountability partners in my reentry also became the people that gave me a job, gave me a car, gave me an opportunity to spend time with their family. And so they really become, you know, your tribe, if you will, you know, your recovery tribe. And much like a sponsor kind of acts as that guide and that wisdom, larger scale, and as people are working through steps in various phases of recovery, that accountability partner is really with you in the trenches day in and day out and can be there when you reach out. But besides all of that, when I first came home from incarceration, I was, you know, shopping for all the essentials, and the person I was with said, "You want to get anything to decorate your home?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So we were walking through an aisle of a Hobby Lobby or something, and I saw this little sign that just said "Live Simply." I bought it. I hung it in my bedroom. It still hangs there.
Yes.
Life on life's terms. That's a challenge.
Yes.
You know, and so a goal for me is to continue to live life on life's terms, to continue to live simply, and to hopefully, you know, use my story in a manner that paves a smoother path for someone else. Can hopefully inject some of this into correctional settings more frequently, but if nothing else, can model the way for the next person to get sober and stay sober, to live in consultation, to be an accountability partner, to be an advocate. Those are my goals. And, you know, continue day in and day out, self-care, the basics, all those things still matter in the midst of those larger goals too. But there's two affirmations that I love. The first is, I am entering a new blessed phase of my life. Always have loved that.
Yes.
But the other one, because I was raised to be a perfectionist and I was raised to use outward facade to cover up inner struggle or struggle behind doors, you know, my parents taught me that. I'm just another bozo on the bus.
That's a great one.
You know?
Yes.
And those both work for me. It allows me to not take myself or anything else too seriously, but also to know that I am on a journey, and it's the only journey I have, and that is a blessing. And each day I still wake up curious about what's to come and hopeful for what's to come.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking time to share your story.
My
it's
pleasure.
one of just hope and redemption, and it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.